Welcome back, everybody. Or good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are. I'm sitting in London at the moment, and it's currently very dark outside. I must start by also welcoming those who perhaps may be joining us for the very first time today. We have been running since 8 a.m. Greenwich Mean Time this morning, and running is literally, I think, the verb that I would use. This is, after all, the race to zero. And it's been quite a day. We have battled with cybersecurity and some of our sessions being somewhat interrupted by a few hackers, which was rather interesting and not something that we put on the event risk register, but certainly caused a few giggles, not to mention a few little stressed heads in the organizing group. But we managed and we came through really successfully. In addition, we've had celebrity A-listers, we've had envoys from the Vatican, we've had Indigenous leaders from communities all around the world. It's been a truly inspiring day. We have had 3 thematic sessions, 3 spotlight sessions, and 8 breakout sessions, and just 1 break half an hour ago today, during which we explored the 3 dominant pillars of our water climate action pathway: protect and restore, reduce and reuse water. We had, in my view at least, and I'm probably somewhat biased, one of the richest water and climate dialogues to date. And we've certainly come a long way since Water Day at COP26, as my co-MC Maggie mentioned earlier today. To Maggie, Danny, and my other excellent co-MCs today, I'd like to say a huge thank you. Thanks also to Jennifer Jun, James Dalton, and Ingrid Timbo for their support, energy, and enthusiasm in pulling not only today together, but also the pathway itself together. There have been a number of late night calls, stressed out conversations, and real moments of joy and celebration and excitement between us. And it's really thanks to them that this day has been what it is today. So can I ask everybody maybe please to switch your cameras on so that everybody knows who I'm talking about, at least for a moment or so. These types of events, when we're, there's many of us online, it can often feel a little bit impersonal when we're not allowed really to share everybody's videos because of said hackers mentioned earlier in the day. Thanks, team. So on behalf of all of us, I'd like to thank all of our partners, especially those that convene the breakout sessions and presented during the spotlight sessions. For your crucial contribution and support for this day, we thank you gratefully. I'd also like to thank, of course, the extensive list of speakers from around the world, across time zones, and those people that joined us to inspire us with their solutions and actions along the climate action pathway for water. And of course, I should thank the climate champions themselves, Gonzalo, Munoz, and Nigel Topping, for being the inspiration for these days overall. Now, speaking of the pathway itself, I think we'd like to take a moment to check in on the Mentimeter poll that we've been running throughout the day. The aim of this Mentimeter poll was to collect and map your individual and organizational goals and actions that you've already taken, or indeed plan to take on water in the face of the race to zero. My goodness, it certainly looks like we have got a lot there, a lot of actions captured there. I think we can truly say that there are solutions and that there's clearly ambition to do more. From binational group of Americans and Mexicans working to restore a living and sustainable environment in the Colorado River Basin, to Wetlands International, who we also heard from earlier, driving building with nature in Asia to restore coastal resilience. Jennifer, James, and Ingrid and I will continue to work on our pathway for the rest of the year. Now, don't worry, there is ample opportunity to engage with us on it and contribute to it. Indeed, this is our sole objective in the weeks and months ahead. We want to create a common vision and pathway for water in both the global north and the global south. In order for this pathway to succeed, to be legitimate, and for ultimately it to ensure that we do run successfully and swiftly along our race to zero, this cross-collaborative input from all of you is essential. Now, to help us summarize this succinctly for us, I'd like to now invite Torgny Holmgren of SIWI for his synthesis of Water Day. Torgny will be followed by remarks from John Matthews from AGWA and Paul Dickinson of CDP. Thank you, Torgny.
Thank you, Kate. And even if it's dark outside my window as well, I will try to shed some light on what we have been discussing today in this full day, rich day. So thank you all speakers and presenters for inspiring us with the possibility of reaching the zero carbon resilient future through water. What today has shown us is that there are significant water solutions to climate change, and they deliver sustainable, lasting outcomes for people, planet, and our collective prosperity. This will play an even more important role in years to come, as we are facing an existential risk if we're not reversing the climate crisis, referring to what Matt Damon and Johan Rockström told us earlier today in the opening session. Now, let me share some main messages emanating from our dialogue today, the water dialogue. Smart management of water and freshwater ecosystems can offer a range of impactful solutions to mitigate carbon emissions that remain largely untapped. A triple transformation is required in order to succeed. The adequate protection of water resources, freshwater ecosystems, and people. Second, a water use revolution in the production of food and energy and the water infrastructure to service citizens, human settlements, and industries. And third, a paradigm shift in reuse of water and wastewater. To reach this transformation, we need levers of change in a number of areas, and I will have 10 of them. First, policy and regulation at local, national, international to take the lead on this transformation. Second, governance. Water-wise governance must ensure sustainable, universal, and fair access to water, sanitation, and hygiene. Reallocate water for society's most essential needs and for ecosystems such as wetlands. Third, finance. The finance and investor communities are catalysts of systemic change, and we learned that there are now increasing and promising blue bonds raising funds on the bond market, and the importance of water funds were also mentioned in many countries. And the financial risk of running out of water is high in any business, meaning that with no water, you actually risk getting out of business. Fourth, demand from industry, agriculture, and domestic consumers will need to shift from their ever-increasing reliance on scarce water resources and unchecked pollutions towards restorative approaches that align with the protection of freshwater resources, ecosystems, and people. Fifth, the adoption of demand-side public commitments to practicing and embracing circular economy principles will be essential in triggering the wastewater revolution. There is a profound need to better value water and ensure that the most vulnerable and the indigenous people with their traditional knowledge are recognized as agents of change. Seventh, technology and innovation generators are needed to deliver and scale water reuse techniques and zero carbon desalination. Eight, I have added biodiversity. The importance of wetlands was highlighted in a number of sessions as main, if not the main carbon sink, actually outnumbering forests in this respect. And I would like to also mention what Inger Andersson, the head of UNEP, told us. We need a new contract with nature. Number 9 on my list is energy. We learn more about the very close connection and correlation between freshwater and energy. Energy sector water consumption is on the increase, as is water sector energy consumption. This tells us, if not something, that there is a real connection between water and most areas in our daily lives. Water connects. And number 10, cities. Mentioned a number of sessions. Cities, 2% of landmass, but soon 70% of people. There we have the future for most human beings. Now, in our spotlight sessions, we have seen and been inspired by a range of actions taken by a variety of actors, multilateral organizations, industries, indigenous peoples, and multi-stakeholder platform. All with an ambition to contribute to a water-wise world that reduces our greenhouse gas emissions, facilitates our adaptation to climate change, and builds a greener, bluer, and more resilient future. Let me finally say that we at SIWI will do our part for climate action, like advocating for systems transformation through, among other things, an integrated approach to implementing the global climate and sustainable development agendas, their source to sea framework, pushing for increased investments in climate solutions, such as rain for agriculture, or providing expertise on how to waterproof the NDCs during the current enhancement process. We are definitely in this race to zero, and we look forward to sharing this endeavor with you. Next year, on the road to COP26, please join us the final week of August for World Water Week, when we will address the theme of building resilience faster. Thank you.
Thank you, Xotyeni. Really comprehensive, and seems like we're going to have a very busy and complex and wonderfully wicked year ahead. Thank you. Over to John.
Thank you so much, Kate. That was a very impressive summary that Xotyeni just provided, very comprehensive. If it is darkness in Sweden right now, it's dawn in Oregon at the moment. So it's been a long night here. I've been asked to talk a little bit about the path forward. I was fortunate enough just over 4 years ago to be one of the 2 chairs at the very first Water Day that Maggie White was mentioning in Morocco at the Marrakesh COP. It was an impressive session. There were maybe 50 globally important organizations that were sitting around the table talking about water and climate. What I've seen today, what I've seen over the past 4 years is we've set a lot more tables. There are many more people who are with us. What's also maybe more impressive is that there are water people at many of the other tables, energy, agriculture, cities, business. We see a lot more action. But maybe the most important point that I want to emphasize is that we've seen a real evolution in what water and climate change mean in practice. And the evolution of the implementation is really significant, and it's important. In many cases, we see institutions that are still in early days, while we see others that are running, and maybe a few that are flying. I want to end with a quick story that I heard last year from some colleagues in the Western Cape in South Africa. Many of you are probably quite aware, maybe even personally affected by the Day Zero crisis that happened in Cape Town. I was really struck in talking to some of the businesses that were involved in the Day Zero event. And they went through a very distinct evolution in how they thought about water and climate risks. At the beginning of the crisis, many of these businesses really thought of their water concerns as something that was external to them. It was the mayor, it was the city council, it was the water utility. What they realized very quickly during the evolution of Day Zero was that pipe from the city stopped at their business. It stopped at essentially their front door, and the water that was inside the building was their problem. And so they immediately, the next step of their evolution was to begin to focus very strongly on where water was in their manufacturing, in their data centers, in the energy systems that they were drawing on, even in areas like transport. They were looking at the water they could see. They were also looking at the water they couldn't see that was hidden inside of the larger systems. But the last stage, the stage that many businesses in Cape Town reached by the end of the Day Zero crisis, was that they realized that the most important water was actually not the water that was in their business. It was the water that was across the community. It was the water that their employees needed in order to take a shower, to cook their food, for their children to be able to go to school. That this is a broad vision of resilience. It means bringing whole communities together. And this larger vision, what in AGWA we've been referring to as deep resilience, is a much more comprehensive vision that says we can't just protect ourselves. The way we protect ourselves is we protect everyone. And this bigger message around resilience, I think, is what the water community has to offer to the rest of the climate change community around both mitigation and adaptation. I think this is going to be the critical message that comes out from the Water Action Track with the Global Commission on Adaptation in January. This is the message that's coming out of a major UNESCO conference on water resilience that's going to happen immediately before COP26 next year. And it is also, in my deepest hope, the message that's going to come out of COP26 as a whole, which I hope is the first resilience COP and really the first true water COP. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John. Really inspiring again, and fabulous storytelling. As you heard earlier this morning from both Nigel and Gonzalo, the climate champions are truly committed to not only running and kicking off this race to zero, but really enabling the race for resilience to gather momentum and speed. And I think we will be central to that race. So get your trainers on again. Don't put them away too far in the back of your wardrobe. I'm now going to introduce Paul Dickinson, who, thank you, John, who's the chair of CDP. Thank you, Paul.
Look, thank you so much, Kate, and great to be with you right now. And I just want to remind the audience that we have a huge number of non-state actors already committed to working on climate through water. And my colleague Emily Krebs was talking earlier about how capital markets are particularly interested in the reuse of water. But we have sufficient evidence now of market demand to be more ambitious. We've had 18 annual cycles of CDP, and the key point is an ambition loop that builds. But we need more ambition from government. Just briefly on CDP, this year we're pleased to have had 10,000 organizations reporting through us, 3,000 giving three major details on their water use, large corporations, 1,000 cities, states and regions also all reporting on their water use through CDP and to the market. Our colleague Kira Appleby talking about that earlier. But this is a way of measuring the innovation of a company and its ability to respond to real world problems to achieve outcomes for all of us. You know, I want to particularly highlight on how we deliver climate goals through water and the outstanding contribution, particularly from indigenous communities. I had the privilege actually last night to interview Shia Bastida, an 18-year-old youth activist, indigenous community representative, who this time last year was with the Secretary General of the United Nations. And she told me these are not natural resources. She said these are sacred elements. And I think we need to develop some of that attention, some of that mindset. So CDP is extremely proud, as I said, to have 10,000 organizations reporting to us in 2020 and using the CDP process to benchmark their performance, track their delivery and report that data to the market. And behind all of this is the move to focus capital and organizational attention on developing technologies to deliver the outcomes that we want. You know, we've learned at CDP that we need to focus on water to deliver on our Paris outcomes in Glasgow. They are all enormously linked. And we agree that ambition is needed, and we call for greater ambition from governments. Let's remember at this critical moment, governments around the world are developing their NDCs, and they need to get water into that strategy. They need to get their cabinet committees looking at water and ensuring that the NDCs represent water as part of their climate solutions. As we all, and this is the genius of the champions, as we all come together to race to zero, because this is a race that we must win, we can win, and we will all win, provided we work together. Thank you, Kate. Thank you all.
Thank you, Paul. Really, really inspiring. Thank you. I am now going to introduce a video. This is been sent in to us over the last few days, and we're really, really very proud to be able to present it to you today. It is a video from Minister Carolina Schmidt, who is the Minister for Environment of Chile and the COP25 President. Thank you.
Dear ministers, authorities and friends, global warming is the most significant challenge that we will face this century. Fighting it decisively is an ethical imperative. Climate change exacerbates the frequency and intensity of local water crises with serious implications for public health, environmental sustainability, food and energy security, and economic development. Floods and droughts already impose huge social and economic costs around the world. Global warming is making these water extremes much worse. If the world continues its current path, projections suggest that we may face a 40% shortfall in water availability by 2030. The consequences of hydrological stress are local, national, regional, and global in today's interconnected and rapidly changing world, with disproportionately impacts that will be felt by the poorest and most vulnerable people. Water and sanitation are at the core of sustainable development. The world must now transform the way it manages its water resources and the way it delivers water and sanitation services for billions of people. Nature-based solution is the most efficient way for a sustainable water management and building resilient societies. Water was a priority area within Chile's enhanced new NDCs that we presented last April in the middle of the COVID pandemic. For the first time in an NDC, it includes a social pillar with our commitment to the Sustainable Development Goals and the 2030 Agenda to improve the quality of life of our people in their territories. Multiple instruments and measures set out in our new NDC specifically seek to enhance water access in terms of both quantity and quality. This includes the commitment to develop targeted management plans for all the Chile's 100 major hydrological basins, recognizing the importance of water availability for health, socioeconomic development, and ecosystem conservation. As we know, COVID-19 has postponed COP26, but it has not delayed the need for parties to deliver on their commitments under the Paris Agreement. Most importantly, the submission of more ambitious NDCs this year, 2020. Updating NDC is not an unnecessary distraction from the pandemic. On the contrary, new updated NDCs can be the beacon establishing a blueprint to guide a sustainable economic recovery from this pandemic. They offer a key framework for unlock vast investment and job creation opportunities in the ever-expanding green sectors, from clean energy and electromobility to nature-based and water-focused solutions. The economic and environmental benefits could be vast. So let us all come together, states, region, business, municipalities, universities, and others, to commit to targets that will lead the way to a cleaner, more resilient, and more sustainable future. A crystal future with innovation and nature-based solutions that ensures clean and available water as a key element for all life in our planet. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Schmidt. I think we can all agree that there is a whole lot of leadership that's coming out of Chile. We've heard from not only from Minister Schmidt today, but we've also heard from AGWA Sandinas and a number of the other communities that are located in that country. If you're looking for an NDC that does it well, that's the one. That's one of the blueprints that we would advertise and advocate for other countries to look at, consider, and adopt as best practice. There are a number of others, of course, out there, and we'll be more than happy to signpost to those. But I was talking with the champions earlier, and I think we're convinced within the water community we have an awful lot of lessons that would benefit the climate community even further to engage in. The specific piece around cooperation is one that I would like to labour for just one moment while I have the floor. There's a misperception, I think, about water many times that often more water will lead to more conflict rather than cooperation. But in fact, evidence suggests that in fact the reverse is absolutely opposite, and that water holds the key to really ultimately enabling true political collaboration to take place. A couple of little stats I've got written down here. Since 1948, history shows that there's only been 37 incidents of acute conflict over water across the 145 states that share river basins around the world. Approximately in that same period, approximately 295 international water agreements were negotiated and signed. That is a real demonstration of how water can bring not only companies and cities and states and regions and citizens together, but ultimately policymakers and decision makers in order to deliver on our low carbon, net zero, water secure ambitions. Now I'd like to hand over the floor to another two amazing women. I think we've knocked it out the park today, actually, with female representation from right across the world. And that's another thing that I'm really very proud of. It's my great honor to introduce Akhona Xotyeni with her live remarks, live from South Africa. Over to you, Akhona.
Thank you for having me, Kate. I would like to greet everyone. My name is Akhona Xotyeni from South Africa, and I'm a climate and human rights activist. I am very honored to be speaking to you tonight. This is such a prestigious platform, but it's very important for young Africans such as myself. For many young Africans, climate change has become personal. It is not something we just hear about on the news or read about online. It is part of our lived experiences. From the droughts, the floods, the heat waves, the storms, to the food insecurity, lack of fresh water systems, deteriorating biodiversity, and unreliable energy systems. Most of us find ourselves caught up in the biggest environmental, social, and economic crisis of our time. And I heard earlier the 2017 Western Cape Day Zero droughts being mentioned, and I also wanted to highlight on that. During that time, I was in a residence in a university in Stellenbosch. We found ourselves having to think of solutions in a residence space of how to conserve water because we're preparing ourselves for the Day Zero drought. We had to think of solutions such as placing bricks in our toilets, showering for 2 minutes, installing gray water systems, using shower water to flush our toilets, and not watering our gardens and our lawns. What was so unfortunate was that even though the drought passed and some of us never made it to Day Zero, there were many South Africans who still find themselves in constant Day Zero with a never-ending drought. With the COVID-19 pandemic affecting many people across the world this year, clean water for consumption and sanitation became mandatory, but many people still find themselves without their basic water needs being met. It has become increasingly important to conserve water and other natural resources successfully in the present and future generations. And we need to understand not just the instrumental values of water, but also the intrinsic value, cultural, and spiritual values that people hold for these resources such as water. In order to do that, natural resource managers need to integrate scientific and indigenous knowledge systems to create a holistic understanding of the importance of our resources, as well as to promote climate literacy amongst all through formal and informal education systems. We also need to create dialogues between public, private, and civil society partnerships. These dialogues will support the green transition and make it just and fair, because in the past, the socio-metabolic transitions weren't fair. Many people of color, women, and children were left behind. And we need to acknowledge these social injustices and human rights violations before we can move forward. Lastly, young people have been largely credited for being at the forefront of driving the climate movement. But I also want to applaud the many adults, particularly those from indigenous communities, who have been passing down knowledge for years to their younger generations. Knowledge about conserving water and natural resources and protecting animals. I grew up in a small community in King Williamstown in the Eastern Cape, South Africa. And regularly on school holidays, I would visit my grandmother. During those visits, she would teach me how to farm organically, find joy and healing in nature, save water and electricity, as well as have various ways of collecting rainwater and reusing grey water. So in 2017, when we started reusing some of these methods during a drought, I realized the importance of going back to our elders and appreciating the knowledge and wisdom they instilled in us. Intergenerational dialogues and mentorship are vital during this time. On the road to COP26, we must realize that in order to address the most pressing issues of our time, we need to invite the past, present, and future generations into the room. We need to prioritize having intergenerational dialogues and young people in places and spaces where decisions are being made. Thank you.
Thank you, Akhona. Really powerful words. And on behalf of the adults in the room today, I can tell you that we're committed to standing shoulder to shoulder with you on the road to Glasgow and beyond, of course, doing all we can. Thank you. Now over to one of our...
Thank you very much, Kate.
Thank you, Akhona. Our final speakers before we introduce the climate champions to end the day is over to Jennifer Sara, who is the Global Director of the World Bank's Global Water Practice. Jennifer is very familiar with the COP process and has been a champion for water for a very long time. So I'm really excited to hear from you today, Jennifer. Over to you.
Well, thank you so much, Kate. And Akhona, those are really inspirational words. I know it's been a really, really long day for many of you. I also got up very early and was able to join a number of these sessions, as was my colleague, Monica. It's been a fantastic session. This is an incredibly important agenda. And we actually have to recognize that we are meeting today in the midst of really extraordinary times. And only last month at the World Bank, we released our third Poverty and Shared Prosperity report. And this reminds us that in addition to the immense death toll of COVID-19, hundreds of millions of people have been thrown back into poverty. So we have three converging forces that drive the increase in global poverty: COVID-19, armed conflict, and you just mentioned conflict, Kate, that's very important, and climate change. And in many cases, these three drivers are directly and indirectly related to water. I am therefore pleased to be able to help close this auspicious event and its efforts to mobilize and coordinate non-state actors in the water sector. And I really do agree with Maggie that it would be nice to find a new terminology for this group. Only together can we help countries formulate ambitious goals and take meaningful decisions related to water in preparing for the Glasgow COP. And in so doing, I would like to offer three key action areas. Firstly, yes, the race to zero is on, and everyone must up their game, setting serious targets and be accountable to deliver them. At the World Bank, we are finalizing our new climate action plan, and one of the key cornerstones will be the commitment to increase direct climate financing to 35% of our portfolio each year. At the same time, we're making sure that all of our investments are designed to maximize climate co-benefits, and this will apply to all of our 100% of our water portfolio, over $26 billion in the water portfolio. To do this, we'll need to increase support for activities that spur transformational change, commit to parity between mitigation and adaptation, and be more strategic on key themes that touch upon water, including integrated land management, biodiversity, among others. I was inspired to hear about the concrete commitments made by others in setting targets, such as Water UK today, Aguas Andinas, and our colleagues from the private sector. Secondly, action must happen at the country level. And for this, we need strong and bold country leadership, like we just heard from Chile. We particularly need country-level reforms in the policy area to pave the way for climate-smart investments in building back better and greener. The World Bank facilitates policy reforms through dedicated policy reform finance. And already now, over 80% of our policy finance loans are being monitored and designed to have some climate co-benefits. But we also know that advancing policy reform is not always easy, especially when there's a perception of winners and losers. But where non-state actors can play a key role is helping to advance the quantifiable evidence to substantiate policy reforms and to support governments in moving forward the reform agenda. Specifically, policy areas which we heard about today, which could be relevant to the mitigation and adaptation goals in the water sector, could include setting efficiency and emission standards for water and sanitation utilities, updating environmental standards to allow for wastewater reuse, as we heard from our presenters from Chile in Mexico earlier today, or establishing clear rules for allocating water across competing needs and provisions for dealing with water variability caused by climate impacts. And finally, as financing gets tight and challenges mount, let's look for win-win investments, working with countries to integrate climate mitigation and adaptation into their regular investment planning, rather than doing it on top or on the side of everything else. There are many ways of doing this, designing projects so they can generate their own revenue while also generating public benefits. For example, in Indonesia, we are working with the government to improve irrigation service delivery for farmers, which enables them to increase incomes while at the same time radically reduce methane emissions and water use. Going forward, we all need to work together to implement such approaches. I thank you so much.
Oh, no, thank you, Jennifer. I'm really, really pleased that we were, as I say, able to have you here today. I think to have an organization as influential as the World Bank on our side is greatly encouraging, and to hear some of the very, very clear suggestions that coming out from the bank and yourself is really refreshing. The water community is sometimes we're often accused of maybe not necessarily being always that clear with our messaging, but I think that's not something that can be said of your intervention today. So thank you so much. Right, we're at the end of our day, and it gives me great pleasure to introduce the two champions, the two people whose fault it is that we're here today, essentially. Those that they've accused me last night of making them work very hard for their supper today and over the last 4 days, and they've got another good few days to go on this, but it's about time we got our own back, I think, a little bit. It's going to be fabulous to hear from Gonzalo and Nigel, their experiences over the last few days, over the last few years, and their vision for the next steps onto the road to Glasgow. And they will be saying the final words in closing. So from me, thank you, everybody, and over to Gonzalo and Nigel.
Well, first of all, thank you, Kate, for your energy and skill in guiding us through the day. It's fantastic. I also want to say hi to Paul. Paul, it's lovely to hear you. And I remember, must be over 10 years ago when we were working on launching water disclosure at CDP, and you came up with the memorable quote. So I never forgot that if climate change was a shark, then water would be the teeth. And I think Akhona's lovely contribution really brought to bear the fact this is about life. It's about human life and about life more broadly. And yes, I agree. We need a much better term than the water community. It's maybe we're the vibrant future life club or something, but not the water community. We need to rebrand ourselves. I also as Kate says, it's really clear the more and more we think about resilience, that water's at the heart of it, whether it's urban resilience, rural resilience, or I think I heard this morning that 90% of disasters are water related. So water's really runs through the whole resilience. I just want to thank all the great partners, SIWI, IUCN, CEO Water Mandate, AGWA, CDP, Global Compact. It's really exciting to see the extent to which radical collaboration is at the heart of us all coming together to make these kind of changes. Also thrilled that we continued the poetry today with the wetlands inspired. The world is better when the bits are kept wetter. I like that. And also really encouraging to hear initiatives building momentum, more announcements. Of course, the Water UK and Agua Sandinas commitments. Great growth in the number of companies and cities taking specific actions. And also to hear about the launch of lots of early stage net zero aligned platforms and initiatives from UN Water, CDP, WBCSD, SIWI, WaterAid, Water Action Track. Of course, all these are going to be crucial to supporting organizations and all kinds of actors in taking action to conserve, preserve, and reduce as well. So with that, I'll hand over to my dear friend. I just wanted to say, I don't know what happened here. We've been pushing one team, two champions for a long time, and then for some reason we had it down on the agenda for Gonzalo to close on his own. But you can't keep me out, Gonzalo.
I know. Yeah. Oh, we were testing you, and it worked properly, right? The pack still connected. So, well, I would like to also start my words by referring to my two personal water obsessions. And being absolutely proud of the work that Agua Sandinas and Minister Schmidt showed today. Well, having that in Chile, that type of example, makes me feel also embarrassed of still having some underwater emissaries in Chile. I mean, that's absolutely unacceptable. So part of my personal expectation is that Chile, from here to Glasgow, somehow commits to removing all submarine emissaries, so we can go into embedding circular economy in the water or the sewage treatment in all of the cities, mostly starting with the coastal zones, right? So that's part of one of my personal obsessions. And the other one, as some of you might know, is dry farming, right? I'm proud to be a wine farmer. That, you know, when we started the winery 20-something years ago, we had 20 liters per second for the winery. And we knew that we were working in an area that was suffering an incremental draw, and now we have less than 1.5 liters per second. That's the level of change that we have suffered in almost 20 years. So what we did is that we started working first with dry farming, and one of our best wine is a dry farm wine that we don't irrigate at all, and had so many good recognition. So I have a bottle of it here. So Nigel, next time, you can have a taste of it.
I am so ready for lockdown. I can't drink your.
I know. He was expecting to be in Nigel's house today, so I'm sorry for that, but it will remain. But the other thing that we were very surprised, and let me change the narrative. It's like we started working with a technique that is called partial root drying, and I don't want to go into the detail of what it means, but we started working with that, and we discovered a few weeks ago, or maybe 1 month and a little bit ago, that we were one of the 2 wineries in the world that are using that technique in the whole winery. And you know what is happening is that we're starting to detect the type of organoleptic descriptors. And you can find some sense of peach and melon when you produce a wine without that much water or directly drying farm. And that is becoming somehow a characteristic that even the clients and the customers and the market is trying to appreciate because of the value that it's carrying, but at the same time, how much is that it's carrying some new elements into the wine. So it's a fantastic story that also can give us a new momentum for some agriculture sectors to really position on the idea of using less water. We're using less than 50% of the water that we were using initially for hectare. And well, I would like to refer to what Cardinal Taxon said this morning. Climate change, both on mitigation and adaptation, is an issue of water. And we can see that happening with so many solutions through the water lens, the climate resilient water sanitation system, nature-based solutions like wetlands, and the paradigm shift on revaluing wastewater. All of that is allowing us to have innovations in the agriculture, in energy, in wetland restoration that should allow us also to position all of those social aspects that he was referring to, and Nigel as well. So we are absolutely, not only happy and proud to be part of this, the Ecuador Prize 2020 winner, spotlighted indigenous nature-based solutions to climate change. We are a solution to our climate crisis. That spirit should be in the center of our work in mitigation and adaptation. We want to tell the story in Glasgow of a world with a clear plan and decisive momentum on track to a zero carbon world, protecting our vital natural resources, starting with water. Kate, I don't want to end this without referring to how much I like the way you run and with the whole team the whole day. I was trying to describe it, the way it was led, it's like, it came to my mind, so elegant and smart soul. And I love everything that you put it in terms of all of the intelligence and the depth of the information, but also all of the soul that is represented into the agenda. So thanks so much for that. Water community, that is no longer the water community, we will find the new name. Thanks so much. Now it's time for the global community to work together to live up and scale up on water solutions to climate change, and definitely win this race to zero together, as Paul was referring to. Thanks so much to everybody that's watching. Tomorrow we continue with land use. See you tomorrow.